Greetings. I am quite pleased to actually be presenting this part of the communication skills training as part of your customer service online training, which is presented to you proudly by the Small Enterprise Development Agency. So this training session will cover four important aspects. We will first discuss what is communication. We'll also discuss the importance of communication as a business person. We'll then discuss different types of communication, which includes, amongst others, your written communication, your verbal communication, and your non-verbal communication. And lastly, we will conclude with giving you a number of tips on how you can be an effective communicator in order to assist, grow your business, and have a great relationship with your customers and all your stakeholders. Then we will conclude our session. Let's begin our discussion by unpacking what communication is all about. In simple language, we can easily say that communication is really an interaction between two or more persons about a particular topic. It's expected that when communication takes place, there must be at least two parties to the conversation in order for that communication to be effective. There must be a message that needs to be exchanged, which must create some form of a meaning in order for that to be understood by both parties. Now, communication is actually a process, and in this process, there is a number of elements of importance that we must discuss. There are 7 elements of importance in a communication process, meaning that in order for an effective communication to take place, there must be firstly the sender who sends a particular message using a particular medium or a method of communication to a person we refer to as a receiver of that particular message. The reason why it is sent to this receiver, it is in order for them to provide some form of feedback. Now, the environment where this particular message is sent will actually determine whether there is positive feedback that is going to be received from the receiver. This happened because in a communication environment, there happens to be a number of barriers to communication that seems to threaten a communication process. If the receiver did not get the message correctly because of environmental factors that are constituting as barriers, that means that those barriers will limit the message from actually being received by the receiver. Let's take a look at this diagram as an example on how barriers to communication could negatively impact on the conversation, on the overall communication between yourself as a business person and your client. If you can typically say that this business person is involved in a business of installation of TV satellite dish, this is the client. Now, after the installation, the business person is attempting to indicate to the client that they only deal with installation and that they will not be providing technical support, maintenance, and any aftercare support. But because the client is using a telephone to communicate and the environment is not conducive, there is bad weather conditions that make the line to keep on breaking. So the client is not able to actually get what the business person is saying. And therefore, there is actually no positive feedback that comes from the side of the client. There is also no written record of this conversation because the client was not able to hear what the business person was saying. So a year later, the client has some issues with their DSTV, and therefore they have some challenges with that particular business person, which ultimately leads to conflicts between the two parties. Now, for us, what is the lesson that we are actually getting from this exercise is that it is also important to bear in mind of all the barriers to communication that might negatively affect the feedback from our client. It might happen that the client comes to our shop, they want to buy something, and there is some communication that is actually taking place with regards to how the client can return their goods for exchange, even for a refund, or maybe issues around the credit terms. If those issues are not thoroughly explained, and if the environment poses some barriers to this communication, it might lead to conflict at a later stage. So it's always important to remember that feedback should be specific rather than just generic. The client must specify what they actually get from the overall conversation. Our previous example has really helped us in terms of ensuring that we understand that feedback is not always positively received from the person that we are trying to communicate a message because of these barriers to communication. We need to be able to identify, understand, and be able to overcome these barriers. There is quite a number of these barriers. You could see that your background, your needs, your age, your gender, your attitude, your language, the education and training of the people you are trying to communicate with could actually be a barrier to communication. If you look for an example, if you consider the language, because we speak different languages, and as a result, if I can't speak your language, it becomes a huge barrier because I don't understand what you're trying to say to me. So if a client walks to you and they start speaking English and you find that you don't have a good grasp of the English language, it immediately becomes a barrier to that particular communication, because now you have to get some form of interpretation from a person who understands the language. Similarly, with age, some people feel that a younger person cannot speak to an older person, and as a result, a younger person naturally would find it difficult to converse with a person of different age or an older age because of their probably even cultural background or the way that they were actually raised up. In other cases, you might find that some people from different kind of gender, they wouldn't want or don't want to actually express themselves in certain settings because of how the society has perceived a particular gender as that of inferior to other gender. Therefore, it becomes a huge problem if you find a client of that nature. They might come a person of that particular gender in your shop, and because of how the society has perceived their gender, they might find it difficult to be able to speak or freely, even in cases where they have to really deal with you in terms of business. And that might actually be another hindrance to that particular communication. You might also find that you are dealing with an emotional person who is feeling angry, who is feeling sad, who is feeling a number of or is having a number of feelings that would actually become also another barrier, because now they have those feelings and emotions that are actually prohibiting them to freely express themselves or express themselves in a manner that is going to be understandable. So all of these barriers, and amongst others, it is always important that you as a business person understands how you can overcome them. It should be recognized and appreciated that overcoming communication barriers is not an easy thing. It is for this reason that we first started by identifying a different number of barriers for us to be able to say, can we be in a position to overcome these type of barriers? If you look at one of which we've identified is language as a major communication barrier between two people. Now, it's important in order for you to overcome language as a communication barrier that you recognize that language has different level of meaning. So people will actually respond differently to even same words, especially if we're talking about words that are vague or general. Language also is another barrier that could also be overcome if we only try and at all times represent arguments rationally without being emotional, and be able to also accept that people may have very, very strong feelings about certain subject that we might be speaking about. We know that people can be sensitive around issues of now of tribe, issues of religion, issues of politics. So we might always try to ensure that we represent arguments rationally rather than even discussing things using our emotion. Also, we mustn't treat people as groups, but we must always try to ensure that we treat them as individuals. We don't have to assume that each and every person they feel the same about certain aspect of our conversation. So we must always try, by all means, not to cluster people in the same group, but we must always treat each and every person as an individual. Ensure that we put aside our stereotypical views at all times in order for us to really gain the hearts of our people that we are trying to communicate with. We mustn't be prejudiced. We must never at any time judge people that we are talking about without even knowing all the necessary facts about the situation. We must always acknowledge that most of the time we really don't have information that is complete. We are usually working with incomplete data. As a result, we must always be open to further explanation so that our data is complete and we are able to judge each and every situation with the kind of information that has been presented to us. And lastly, in terms of your culture, we must always try and be aware of different backgrounds, education, experience, and be able to give people different expectations. Now, you might be asking yourself, why communication? What is the importance of communication? There is actually a huge power in learning a communication skill, because if you can be able to communicate effectively, this will help you in order to ensure that you build on your existing relationship. It will also ensure teamwork with regards to all the employees that you are working with. Further to that, your customers will also feel that they are actually being considered and they are actually being cared for. Most importantly, resulting into a successful business, which will also ultimately turn into loyalty. Loyalty from your customers, loyalty from your team members, and all the stakeholders that you are dealing with. As a business person, on a single day, you have to communicate with a number of stakeholders, and therefore it's important that you try by all means to master this important skill. Now, I want us to take a moment and reflect. How are we in terms of our ability to communicate with our clients, our suppliers, and anyone who we're dealing with as business persons? It is important that we do this assessment in order for us to see where we need to improve. Now that we know of the critical aspects of communication, do you feel that your communication is poor? Do you feel that it's average? Or do you feel that it is good and perhaps could be excellent with further training and development? How are your customers and suppliers? Once you have answered these questions, I would want you to think of what can be done in order to improve on your communication skills. We have said that we are going to be discussing 3 different types of communication, amongst which include written, verbal, and non-verbal communication. So let's begin with our written communication. What is our understanding of written communication? So written communication is the transmission of a message, an order, or an instruction in writing. It can be print or it can be typed into a document, a letter, email, fax, and newspapers. So we are saying that the major problem associated with this type of communication is that there is a lot of mistakes sometimes that happens. Issues around grammar, issues around vocabulary, formatting of the message, the layout, and also the patience that is actually required from writing a message. Now, this is not only a problem for a person who is actually writing, but a major problem for a person who is going to be reading that particular message, which then says that the barrier now here would be the message itself, because it might not be clearly understood by the receiver, and as a result, it might be difficult for them to be able to understand and be able to provide feedback. This is a problem majorly because once an email, an SMS, or any form of written communication has actually been written and submitted or sent to the person intended, it is very difficult to retract or really return that particular message for you to be able to correct it. So if there's spelling and grammatical error or vocabulary error, once sent, it's way difficult for you to be able to retract it, for you to also sort it out. So it is important that when we write, especially when we're writing emails, we ensure that we have proofread those emails and we have satisfied ourselves that they are really free from any errors that might make the message to be distorted. Let's look at the following video in order for us to see what would be an effective email and how we should use email as an effective written communication tool.
For the past few decades, email has been a cornerstone of business communication, and over that time, it's developed a unique style and structure. All business emails should be direct, clear, and easy to read. The formality of your writing, however, can vary, depending on your company, your readers, subject matter, or other factors. No matter what you're writing, remember to stay professional, because you lose control of an email once you click send. Emails can be copied and forwarded to others indefinitely, so make sure you choose your words carefully. When it comes to the subject line, you want it to be brief and descriptive. If it's too vague or rambling, you may lose your reader's attention. Every email needs at least one recipient, but if you're including multiple recipients, consider using the CC or carbon copy field. This keeps those extra readers in the loop without requiring them to respond. Make your greeting brief and friendly, and address the recipient by name if you know it. The first name is preferable if you're more familiar with the recipient, and you should use their last name if you want to be more formal. In the body of your email, start with your main point so it's easy to find, and keep your writing concise and focused on your readers. If you need a response from your readers, include a call to action so they know how to respond. Also, if you've attached a file to your email, be sure to mention it here. As you reach the ending, offer a quick farewell such as thanks or sincerely. Then give your name and contact information. Writing concise emails is a powerful skill that you can develop through consistent practice. Keep writing and learning, and you'll become a more effective communicator with every email you send.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life.
Indeed, once it has been written, it can never be recalled. Once you have sent that email, it can never be recalled. So it is always important to ensure that all our written communication are free from any form of error that might distort the message, making it difficult for the persons it is intended for to be able to provide positive feedback. Now, what is verbal communication? When we speak of verbal communication, we are speaking about different types of communication where the message is actually transmitted through spoken words. So here we are talking about face-to-face talks and discussion. We are talking about any form of a speech. We are talking about lectures. We are talking about interviews, a meeting. We are talking about a telephone or a video conferencing, and any form of communication that involves spoken words. It's always important and helpful to actually support the verbal communication with some form of non-verbal and written communication in order to ensure that the message is effectively transmitted. It's always also important to acknowledge that not every one of us is actually a born speaker. Therefore, it takes a bit of practice to master the ability of expressing yourself in spoken words. Therefore, it is important that we must try to improve on this very important skill. If a person comes to your shop, they will speak to you by way of a discussion, spoken words, face to face. Therefore, if you are unable to respond effectively and accordingly, it might lead to a discussion not actually being fruitful for both parties. Now, in helping you to master your verbal communication skills, there are two elements of discussion that will assist in this direction. The first one is the pitch of your voice, because a number of people will actually pick up on the pitch of your voice and they will even react to the pitch of your voice. Therefore, if you pitch your voice very highly, some people might interpret it as being upset or anxious. If you pitch it, however, low, it might sound serious and might sound authoritative. Therefore, you must try to vary your voice or vary the pitch of your voice so that you ensure that you keep people interested in what you are saying. This can be done by trying to actually lower it while maintaining a smile, which will actually warm everybody's voice. The other element is to ensure that you maintain minimum speed in your discussion. Because if you speak fast, this might actually affect the overall conversation. Speed can affect the listener's level of interest. It can also affect the comprehensibility of your message. It can also affect the tone and the pitch of the discussion. Therefore, it is important that you try and speak slowly but clearly, that you smile all the time as you have your discussion, so that you help yourself to keep yourself calm at all times, and that you try and monitor the speed of your speaking, while also ensuring that you guard on your nervousness, as it will impact on your speed. If you are very nervous, it might actually make you to speak more faster, which might make your discussion not clear and people will not be able to hear what you are saying. Now, you can easily practice the skill of verbal communication in your business by using your telephone professionally, by answering your telephone and cell phone professionally. I understand that a lot of people nowadays are using their cell phone in order to do business, to conduct business. Therefore, it's always important that you treat the caller in the manner that you would like to be treated if you were placing that particular call. If I call a person and it just happened that I reached them on their cell phone, clearly I was given that cell phone by someone who has had experience with that business. So how I treat that particular person would actually help in terms of ensuring that you maintain that good relationship with the person, who might even be a prospective customer, who might even a prospective investor, or someone who can help your business to grow. So whenever you are actually practicing telephone etiquette, you must ensure that you answer calls professionally, that when placing your call, you treat a person as if the same manner that you would like to be treated. And when you are handling issues that relate to business, you ensure that you are at your best professional behavior at all times. Now, when we talk about non-verbal communication, we are talking about the use of your body language, your gestures, your facial expression as a way of conveying a particular information to others. Now, this can be used sometimes intentionally or unintentionally. For instance, if a person walks into your shop, you might unintentionally smile at them as a way of greeting them, and they in turn might actually do the same. Now, this method of communication is by far one of the most effective communication types, because studies have actually proven that our body communication or body language accounts for over 55% of the overall conversation. You can see that the voice and the words actually account for just 38 and 7% respectively. It says that before you even utter a word, your body language would have actually made a huge conversation to your customer, and therefore they would have actually decided how you actually perceive them as they actually walk into your business. Therefore, it's important that we have an understanding of the importance of nonverbal communication, and we understand the nonverbal cues in order for us to be able to effectively respond in cases of any discussion that might arise using nonverbal communication. Peter Drucker rightfully said that the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said, because what isn't being said accounts for a larger portion of the overall conversation. Therefore, it's important that we actually take into consideration all these non-verbal cues and be able to address them accordingly in order to ensure effective communication. The next video will help us to understand different types of body language and how we can effectively respond to them.
Alice works at a local department store. She spends most of her day interacting with customers and coworkers. There's a lot of talking involved, but there's also another form of nonverbal communication that's being used just as often: body language. Body language is the process of communicating through nonverbal signals. It includes things like our posture, facial expressions, gestures, and more. The meanings of these all vary from culture to culture, but we instinctively read body language and interpret it as some expression of moods, feelings, or intentions. So, in Alice's case, even before she speaks, she may be communicating all kinds of things to customers. For example, if her arms are crossed and she's avoiding eye contact, customers may not find her to be very approachable. However, Alice could be in a friendly mood, even though her body language suggests otherwise. And this isn't necessarily a conscious choice that she's made. This could just be how she habitually presents herself. But if Alice is aware of these habits, she can work on improving her body language. Changing your habits can be difficult, but if you take time to pause and check in with yourself, you can start to notice them and adjust things to become a better nonverbal communicator. This awareness can also be applied to reading others' body language. Let's say Alice notices that her coworker is unusually quiet, has his body turned away from her, and is slouched over. She may pick up that he's upset, or that there's an unspoken issue at hand. Depending on Alice's relationship with him, she may want to give him some space, or ask if anything's wrong. Being aware of the various aspects of body language can make all the difference in how people perceive you and how you perceive them. Be aware of how you present yourself, and you can say a lot without speaking.
GCF Global, creating opportunities for a better life.
Indeed, hearing what hasn't been said is the most important aspect in communication. Now, I want us to take a moment and look at this picture. There are different types of facial expression. I would like you to discuss how can you be in a position to deal with each and every facial expression demonstrated on this picture. How would you be able to deal with a person that is angry, sad, confused, or a person that is looking bothered? As we move towards the end of our discussion, let us give you tips on how you can be a better communicator. Number one, be an active listener. So active listening is a very important skill in communication. Remember, it is possible to listen and talk at the same time. And often we fall short of this skill because we rush into responding before we actually get the full grasp of what the other person is saying. Customer might come to you and they might actually not remember what the product they want, what brand it is, what feature it has. So it might be a problem for you to be able to understand if you are unable to listen and give them time to express themselves before you respond to them. You can do that by also following it up with open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are questions that have got an opportunity for the client or the customer to expand on the question rather than just respond with a yes or a no. Engage with the other party. Engage with your customer in terms of your body language. You've spoken about body language. You've said facial expression, your hand gestures. All of these things form very important components in an effective communication process. Because if a client gets the sense that you are really not listening to them, they might actually react and they might not appreciate the discussion, and they will not really even want to buy in your shop at all. You mustn't make any assumption and prejudgments. Sometimes we rush into making assumptions because we feel that we know what the other person is going to say. Often this leads to conflicts. So you must try to ensure that you do not make assumptions, you don't prejudge your customers before you fully understand all the facts that are involved in that particular discussion. Be friendly, smile, give eye contact, and be approachable. In cases where the client comes to you and you see that they might actually be angry, they might actually be confused or sad, you must demonstrate to them that you are a welcoming and approachable person who really is looking forward to actually interacting with that particular customer. The customer must feel as if they are the only customer in your business because of the level of respect and professionalism that you are actually displaying to them. They must feel like they are the only ones that are your customers. Lastly, we know that we are not masters in communication. So the skill of communication is something to be improved on a daily basis. So every time when you're communicating with your fellow staff members, with your fellow employees, with your fellow customers, or anybody, your suppliers, your investors, your funders, you must try to assess yourself and see if you can improve on your communication. In that way, you will ensure that you become an exceptional communicator whose ability to communicate ensures customer satisfaction, which will lead to your business being successful because the customers will be loyal to your business. Now, this brings us to the end of our training session. In recapping, we have discussed what is communication. We've also discussed the importance of communication in your business as you deal with your customers. We've also discussed 3 types of communication, being written, verbal, and non-verbal communication. We've also given you a number of tips on how to help you to improve on your communication skill so that you are a better communicator. We trust that this training has helped you or will also help you to ensure that you build and improve on your skill of communication. Thank you for participating in this training session. This training session was proudly brought to you by the Small Enterprise Development Agency, an agency of the Department of Small Business Development of South Africa. For more information about the services of Seda, please visit www.seda.org.za. End of session. Thank you.